governance meeting. First thing on the agenda, we need to approve the minutes from August.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. First thing on the agenda is policy primers. So,
Ready? Okay. So thanks. We got some new faces here this evening, and it's our first P&G meeting in a while. But what we typically get from the legislature is code change, right? That happens during the legislative session, and then from the School Board Association, we get updated policy for us to consider adjustments we need to make for our policy. So what you see there are a bunch of those primers and the updated suggestions that we're offering to you guys. Kim and I shared some frustration this afternoon that as soon as we got these on your agenda, we got a whole other email full of them this afternoon that we'll be bringing you here next month. So that's why they're somewhat out of order, and they're all over the place. They're not just in the 100 series. So happy to try to answer any questions there. But these are ones, again, suggested to us from the School Board Association after any legislative changes that have occurred.
are there any questions?
So we did get an email about this one, this very first one, 200.3, concerned about the board not having any involvement with some of these matters before it turns into a board hearing. And so I think everybody in the board got that email. Did you have a chance to read that? I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
I guess I understood the tone of that email. We're going to make these choices based on the board that we have, and all being reasonable folks. It's like, to me, that tone of the email is like, well, you should be able to investigate things, right? Well, what does that mean? Like, for a school board member, would we go to, like, do we really think that's wise? That any given school board member would go investigate? Because we don't have nobody tells us what to do. We don't have any accountability to any higher power except the voters. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because, okay, so are you going to run again? We don't. So that's our only accountability. Well, how would anybody know if we're abusing that power or if we're using it inappropriately? I just would want, and then do we really think members of the public expect us to, like, personally go see if the basketball coach is doing his job correctly? So I'm really leery about that. I mean, I get the tone, like, we shouldn't limit ourselves at all. But when I play it out, like, well, if we had board members who felt it was their duty to personally look into matters, who holds them accountable?
I'm wondering why it has to be added now. Like, what happened? What was it before? I mean, why was it in there before?
Anything on that one?
Let me look at something really quick. I think it's just their suggested language.
Okay, you want the legislative history to see what we're comparing it to.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why it was in there before, because everything with JP, so it makes sense.
Yeah, we're kind of looking there, Jane. I'm not sure what would have changed with that because I guess I'm not clear exactly what email you guys are referring to or what was communicated to you guys.
The key information that this person is concerned to remove yourselves from the power to investigate or become involved is to deprive yourselves of the very broad and implied power the Iowa legislature grants public school boards, including the power to conduct the affairs of each school corporation. And then she continues, voters elect school board members to represent the public, and the public should be able to make requests of their elected officials, including requests to ask about or investigate issues which you can choose to pursue or not. School board oversight may also result in negating the need for a hearing. So this person is suspicious of the IASB, says that it has made mistakes. I'm sure every entity of that size has, but anyway. And just thinks that she's cautioning us from removing ourselves from the power to investigate. My opinion is similar to JP's. I don't want to investigate things. I am not qualified because I am not a superintendent, a principal, or a teacher. Like that, and you are a teacher, but it's not your school. You know what I mean? Like, we're not qualified to do that. So I think it's important for us to remove ourselves from even being pressured to do said investigation. I think it's a real dangerous thing to do.
And, yeah, I think where my issue is similar to their point, because I think that can create an issue, because then it would become, well, you investigated this, but you didn't. And how do we do that with fidelity? And it's, again, we're not trained to be investigators as, say, Eric is, as an investigator for the district. I just worry that there could be some missteps.
Right. I think maybe what the concern is not that the board member actually do the investigation, but that if there was a concern from a parent or a teacher, well, maybe not a teacher, but a concern from a parent that was brought to a board member, that the board member could then not have any power to inquire as to, what is going on. This sounds irregular.
Yeah, but no, and that's a good point, but that's not how I read these changes, because as a board member, with any concern that a parent raises, I'm going to do my job. I mean, that's somebody that has me in this seat to ask questions of our administration and bring that to their attention and want to know what's going on with us.
Okay.
So to me, that doesn't limit that, because I don't view that as an investigation.
Yeah, so what I do, for example, people call all of us, right, and they'll say, hey, I heard such and such happened on the baseball team. And I'll be like, okay, well, fortunately, I don't know anything about that, because I don't, I'm not supposed to know the details. But I'll say to Superintendent Degner, hey, someone asked me about this. Would you look into it? And he's like, yeah, and then that's all I'm supposed to do,
Yeah, so I think the spirit, sorry, JP, the spirit of this one, Kim and I just looked here, I don't think is as much from a legislative change. It looks like the School Board Association's attempt just to clarify the 4 roles the board plays, right? It adds in that last one. It clarifies the quasi-judicial duty, because you guys, as you're familiar with, could be called in to have to basically kind of hear a decision or have a hearing in some instance over an issue that the administrative team's trying to work on, and trying to preserve your neutral role in that. And getting involved in any of those things from an investigatory standpoint or knowing too much personnel information would, of course, bias you in one fashion or another. So I think it's really more of an add-in and a clarification of that quasi-judicial role. And I think you guys are giving good examples of what our normal workflow looks like, right? If you have an issue, then you communicate that, or if you've heard of an issue, you communicate that to me. We give you, some response about how we are trying to address the situation, or what kind of procedure or process we're putting around the situation to address it. I think it's an attempt to keep you neutral, and in that attempt that, there would be, on some level, you would have to hear that down the line because there's a dissatisfied party.
And the policy is limited. It's only, does not investigate or involve student disciplinary matters or employment matters that may come before it. So it isn't like a parent complaint or anything. It's just student discipline specifically or employment. Because both of those, those can be appealed at the board level. And if I know too much about a kid's suspension, I don't know that I can be a neutral. Or an employment matter, if I'm in the weeds too much on one side, I can't actually be neutral. And if it's one person, okay, but what if there's 4 board members who need to recuse themselves, and now there's literally no mechanism for anybody to get resolution because it's been sort of tainted by, so to me, this limits it pretty safely to student discipline and employment matters that would come before us. And so I think something wrong with the baseball team.
You can still ask. I mean, you
Yeah,
ask, but I don't want to investigate.
But I don't think we want board members going to the baseball team and saying,
Nope.
hey, I heard.
Exactly.
um,
That makes sense. That explanation made sense to me.
And the good thing is, I mean, this is the first sort of introduction to the policy primer. I mean, we will talk about it at the board table tonight.
Right.
But we don't move to adopt them until the next meeting. So if folks continue to think about it and have more questions, that gives us at our next P&G meeting an opportunity to discuss, right? We'll have a P&G meeting before it's brought before the board. And eventually, we have the same conversation up there to discuss, so. Because sometimes, I know for me,
Yeah.
hearing information, I like to think about it, mull it over.
Yeah.
And sometimes that raises more questions, or then it's like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to hear the discussion between
Yeah.
us since we got that email.
Yeah. Fair point. Any other questions about some of these primers?
No one wants to talk about radon mitigation?
No.
Okay.
What? I'm excited.
No, thank you. So we're going to move on to the next one, which is the 100 series policy review. And that's just part of our normal cycle that this month we're supposed to review the 100. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Jane.
I did have some more notes.
Oh, sure.
I was thinking it was the 100 series, but I've got more notes on the policy.
Okay, let's dive into it.
Okay, all right, so the 401.13R1. How big this policy is. Let's see.
Technology.
Somewhere in there, we're talking about emails to students, and I know we have the talking points thing now, but earlier, at an earlier board meeting, I brought up the idea of if a teacher is emailing a student, that another adult should be CC'd on that email, either maybe like a co-teacher or a para or a parent. And I didn't know if anyone was interested in adding that into the policy, though. We might.
It's an interesting idea.
It's a practice that my boys' soccer club uses.
I see those.
There's no coach that contacts a student without another adult on that communication, so.
And it could be the parent.
It could be the parent, yeah, either another coach or a parent.
Is there a reason we don't do that? Like at the elementary level,
Yeah.
you break it down. Just curious, just thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first question would be, yeah, are we talking staff or parent then, right? I mean, I'm sure we would, and I'm not going to put Brady on the spot to that, but I'm sure we would have some staff concern about just volume of emails then, right? If we were copying somebody on there. I'm just trying to think through and just thinking out loud, so,
Yeah.
before you criticize the response. I
already
think there
terrible.
could be, some volume of email issues. You think about how many times secondary students are probably emailed assignments and coursework. That's a pretty high volume. So if we're going to copy an adult on there every time, that sounds easy, but that's probably an overwhelming aspect for some staff members to keep up with in that sense, or if it's going to be the principal every time. I mean, we're flooding some inbox there. It could be a little different for elementary students, I would think about. The other protection we have on email a little bit is that we can search any email, right? We can recover an email. We can see any kind of problems happening on email. The texts are more problematic for us, or social media are more problematic because we don't have those. And I think that's the solution on the talking points end. So I don't think, probably if Adam was here and we talked about our risk level or concern level, it's not as high on the email as it is. But that's not to say we haven't had issues via email. We definitely have, and had to follow up on some of those things. But we have a trail to follow up there. That's not prevention, right? That's reaction to a concern. So those would be just a few quick things I would think about. But
I think the key thing is for it to be the email, right, instead of the text.
yeah.
Yeah, without even adding anybody. you have a record of that.
Are teachers texting?
And coaches do.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
and that's the
I-
part
no.
about
No,
inserting
yeah,
the
yeah.
talking
And they-
points.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
I mean, in that though, actually, the policy does say you're
It does.
supposed to include your supervisor on a text. And it should be a group text.
Or a
It
group
should not be
text.
an individual text. It should be the whole team or the whole band. So there
then
is
if
that.
somebody violates that, that's something that.
It is something to try to follow up
And
on.
then we
Yeah.
follow up,
We
yeah.
do.
Like I know we're on the dance team text, and oh my gosh, there's a lot of text. Let me tell you,
I mean,
the
there-
parents are included, and there's a lot of text. So a lot of emojis, a lot of emojis.
Yes!
I think on the email piece, one of their, you asked why, now I'm like Matt, trying to think, okay, why wouldn't we do that? And why would it work on a soccer team as opposed to like in school? Is there's probably FERPA concerns, right? Unless you have the permission of the student
Okay.
for that other person to know that educational record's going on.
So then it would go to the principal, and
It
then,
would,
yeah,
it would
it would
have
have
to go
to
to
be
the
the
principal or the
principal.
parent, otherwise the colleagues would have to get together and every student would have to okay that person to have access to those emails.
Right.
And again, like
Yeah,
just
for
kind of
the CC,
spitballing
for
what.
the CC thing, I think
Yeah.
I was more concerned about like, is it going through email breath versus
Right.
text? I think
Yeah.
the texting thing and contacting through social media, that's the
Yeah,
concern that I
for sure.
have.
And that's where our concern is too, and when we
Okay.
try to, and quite honestly, like Matt said, that's the piece that we don't have a systematic monitor on, like with an archive, but with talking points we do. And so even those text messages, then we do have that archive to go back, it's why we're going to that.
Yeah.
But to what Ruthina said really right now is when we hear from parents or from students or from ADs that their coaches are doing that, we immediately follow up because we just don't have that protection like we do.
Right.
So
But
my
the email
follow-up
system.
question is probably triggered by a podcast I'm listening to, so it's, might be sensitive. Say my high school daughter gets emails from a teacher, they're, and yeah, sometimes they do emails to the whole class about a homework assignment or whatever. But what if the emails are just to my daughter and they're from a teacher, male or female, but they're not necessarily ones that should be sent? And as you said, we have a reaction we can do. But like, what you're saying is, we're not quite worried enough about that we would require emails that are the exception to homework. I don't know how you define it, and we don't have to decide any of this today, but like, that would be a concern I would have about a teacher grooming. I mean, I had a bunch of friends that were groomed in one way or another in high school, often by coaches, I get it. But it can happen, right? So it's just something, if we want to think about, if there's a way to do that, FERPA notwithstanding.
I would say, I think it's really hard, just like our kids, adults can find the workarounds. So whether that's through a Google Doc or whatever, it's really just
Oh, Google Doc, sure.
about the behavior or chat, just think about kids trying to get around what we're trying to
Okay.
let them to. I think it's just really hard.
Yeah, we have to be pragmatic, so I appreciate that. I'm just thinking out loud like.
Yeah, and I think that's why Amy's got a good point there about the tool. I mean, you focus on one tool and then it shifts to something else, or if, and so the most concerning tool that we had out there was, how either through social media or, the mobile devices that folks are communicating on. And so trying to shift them all to the same platform is a major step in the right direction there. Even the Google Doc or email, again, we have some follow-up we can do there where we wouldn't if it's a cell phone number or if it's through a social media account to get access to those things. So I think that's a step in the right direction, and probably also just something we have to keep thinking about how we talk to our staff and work with our staff about appropriate communications. And
I don't know if this touches on it, but if I think about that, grooming, hopefully at some point in, say, health class, like it's covered. Like we're teaching our kids what that means, right? Our height, our age-appropriate kids that we've determined in our curriculum, that we do understand that, so that, because at the end of the day, if adults are behaving poorly, they're gonna find a workaround. But our kids need to protect. I mean, I feel the same way about sexual assault. Like, are we teaching our kids what consent means, and where do we cover that? And it seems like it would fall in a health curriculum, like in a sexual health concept. These are things you should be aware of because these are things that happen, and how. Because I think the best thing we can do is inform our staff and our kids about things like this.
Yep.
Yeah.
advisory.
Because we're not gonna be able to policy our way out of every bad behavior.
Yep,
True.
got it. I just needed to think that through, and I appreciate that dialogue. It makes sense to me.
But even if we found out the emails that you're talking about were sent, we would consider that inappropriate. Like if we pulled, for some reason pulled random emails and teachers were sending students emails that were not about curriculum or were not school related, regardless if it's grooming, regardless if it's romantic or sexual in nature, we would deem that inappropriate because they're not, and we tell them, we
Okay.
talk to the staff all the time, is you're not to be contacting kids about things, even via email, that are not related to your job as
Right.
the instructor or the coach. And so we don't just address concerns where it is explicit grooming or romantic nature. And we had a circumstance where we've had these circumstances
Okay.
where we're like, no, like there's no reason for you to be emailing your students
Yeah, you're not
at
buddies.
9:30 at night
Yeah.
about who their girlfriend is. Like that's, yeah, or what they
Yeah.
did at the park. Like that's outside your purview. Don't do it. And so we do take it, try to be diligent
Okay.
to that level.
Great.
And JP, your point's a good one too, about talking to our kids and making sure you get.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do advisory, we have advisory lessons that, you know, talk about that. And kids are, I mean, I think we should continue that. And I will say that, you know, our students are savvy. I think that they have a keen sense about something not feeling right or being right.
Mhm.
Helping them understand where to go with that is, you know, part of our job. But they're pretty savvy.
It's the junior high kids, the elementary kids that aren't savvy.
Could be, yeah, I live with high school kids.
They get groomed.
Yeah.
Okay, just looked at that 5th grade personal safety lessons. Lesson 1, healthy relationships and consent. Lesson 2, what is harassment and consent? So
Yeah.
there's an example of where we're getting it
Good.
to our kids.
Good. All right. Is there
Another
more
one?
questions?
I do. Just putting on my medical hat here, but I can't find where it was. I thought it was 507.2, and it just a change a few of the words. I think they used, they used canister when I think they meant meter, dose, and healer. And they spelled physician assistant only for them. Sorry, I can't help myself.
Regulation was spelled wrong in one of the titles.
There's a word distribute in there that I thought should be changed to prescribe. And then at the end of it, there's something about misuse and being disciplined. And I wonder if that should be changed to educated, because I feel like if a student is misusing a medication, I can't find any of this.
Is it in the
It might be in the, yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
non-numerical one?
Okay.
Maybe, I'm just kind of,
Well, I mean, I saw some 507.2, I did see
It's
some
maybe
misspellings
E1.
there.
Okay, yeah, maybe
depends
that's
on
where
who
it
they
is.
be. Canisters.
Yep.
Canisters or spacers,
Mhm.
yeah, metered dose inhalers with or without spacers, what I would say.
Do you want to
I can get
shoot
with,
those changes?
I'll send them to Kim. Is that okay? Is that what I should do?
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
Because you're using words I don't understand.
You get to spell it, Mark.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Jane, can you go back to where did you find the discipline language? Was it at the end? I can't find
It
it.
was towards the end, and I will find, can you find it? Yes. Okay, if the student abuses the self-administration policy, the ability to self-administer may be withdrawn by the school, or discipline may be imposed.
Second to last paragraph.
Hmm.
I guess, I just thought they're misusing medication, maybe there's a deeper issue in, I don't know.
Maybe we
Didn't
just
know if
add in a
discipline was
comment
in there.
around education.
Yeah, something about education.
Some education as well,
Yeah.
because we always want to do both, so.
The rest I'll send to Kim.
Okay.
Word changes.
You all set?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. So then we'll jump over to one of the 100 series as part of our policy review. As probably, Jane, you'll recall, we went through these last year. So it's just another review of them
Yeah.
and see if there are needed edits or changes.
So the one thing I would just say is for us going through these the second time would be we just want to be careful of the risk to over edit as well.
Yeah.
So now that these are recurring basis for us, and I'm not sure if Jane was with us the first time we would have done the hundreds or when you jumped into the series review on this. But I think that'll just be something as we do this on a recurring cycle, is that we don't want to get to the point where we edit so much that we lose the origination of the policy or the substance of the policy, right? So the more we look at it, the more we might be inclined to want to tweak some words or language, but then that can start to have some impact. So just a cautionary tale as we go through these probably for the second time and work in the new primers and all of that, for us something to all be aware of. But yeah, so whatever you guys have on the 100 series, I think we're ready to try to respond to or talk about.
JP or Jane, do you have anything? Questions?
I have some.
Sure.
Okay, so 101, education and philosophy of the school district. The very last line, the school district strives to maintain an active relationship with the home and the school district community, create within students and learners and dignity, and work with individuals to be responsibility and respect for authority. I'm all for respecting authority, but I guess I just felt like that was just, I read that, I was kind of like, respect, it just seemed like just thrown in there. And I mean, I also think it's important to question authority. So I just, and if you don't want to change it, that's fine with me, but I just wondered if maybe it would read better to say respect for self and others rather than respect for authority. Because it just seemed like blind respect for authority. You know what I mean?
That's the most Iowa City take I've ever heard.
Respect.
I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying that it's so Iowa City. I'm from Cedar Rapids. It's not, but I don't hear you, and maybe you're right. I mean, respect for self and others. There's nothing wrong with it.
That's all I got.
Superintendent Degner looks like he likes that change a lot.
I don't think it's our call. You guys write the policy, so.
What do you think?
I'm not married to it one way or the other, so I'm fine with presenting that as a possible change to the rest of the board.
Kimmy?
Yeah, as long as it gets the point across. I mean, I think the fundamental word there is respect and
Yeah.
not authority. And to be honest, authority, I mean, it is implied that we do have authority. We have rules all over the place that indicate that. And the thing is, what if they don't respect authority, right? Here's what happens. There's a whole bunch of other policies that cover that. Because it
Right.
probably means they're doing something, right?
Putting it in there doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? Saying respect authorities, that doesn't make people respect authority.
I think we
Right.
do have policies all over the place that
Right.
are clear indicators.
Yeah.
If a kid is violating them, we have discipline procedures.
I
That,
like it.
It's self and others, that's everyone.
I like
That's
it.
everyone.
You convinced me.
I will say, when I read respect for authority, I did have a South Park voice in my head.
Yeah, it's been my toy.
That might not be a reason to change.
Yeah, changes that, I mean, I'm not married to it one way or the other, and we can bring that to the full board.
There was one, I think it was page 32, where it said bring the complaint to the superintendent, and I noticed in all of our other policies that you had changed superintendent to another entity like equity director, and so I kind of wondered if maybe that just got missed and you wanted to change that to the director of equity. And I thought it was on page 32.
Should probably be superintendent or designee, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it says, yeah.
It does say that, okay. And then on page 37, I think you had a line twice. It's in a bullet point. A request for the complainant to provide a written statement regarding the nature of the complaint, a request to provide a written statement. So I don't know if you're missing a word there.
It's the
Respond.
bullet point at the top.
Respond.
Maybe the
Yeah,
responded.
probably.
Mhm.
Good catch.
Request for the complaint.
Oh, I
and then
did.
request
Yeah.
for the.
I think I caught that, it's in the investigation protocols.
Oh, so it'll be
The-
changed in the.
The next thing we're gonna look at are
Yeah.
some actual changes that we're proposing to the ones that Jane's talking about right now, so I'm trying to toggle back and forth to see if we caught it or not.
I thought it was, yeah, there was.
I think the one Jane.
That is probably is respondent, it has to be, right?
Yeah, that's what I.
Yeah.
Complaint and
yeah.
respondent
Mhm.
and witnesses.
That's all I have on
Good catches. So then that's a good segue into investigation protocols, since you brought that up.
Yeah, so I'll kick it off and then give it to Chase just for a little history here. So this was something that popped up a few different times for us last year with just different concerns about, or questions that came up about how we handle investigations, closeout of investigations, updates throughout investigations. And I would think probably just from a perspective issue, right? I mean, we know our kids struggled during COVID, and I would say our adults also struggled during COVID, right? So we had a lot more investigations to the point, I've been worried about Eric, right? I mean, he's been balancing a lot. And so we've talked to him a couple times just about the volume of those things that have come through. And I think that was just a sign of people aren't right. And, but for us, it also highlighted some things that, in a continuous improvement organization, we want to continue to look at doing better and where can we improve our process. And so Chase pointed out that a lot of these link to the 100 series. And so there's going to be some suggested changes in there. But this was an item I kind of identified through a concern or two that popped up last year as some work that we needed to do, and that board's decision was to send it to P&G to look at. I think we did that once in the spring before we went to summer, and then now we're bringing it back to you at the first one here. So with that, I'll kind of let Chase take it away.
Thanks, Matt. So I was kind of talking with Jane, and she brought up a couple of things, but overall, just continuing on that kind of that global view. One of the things we noticed when we looked at this is that a lot of the processes are already covered. What we tried to do was really make sure that they were consistent, especially if you look at 102 R1 and 104 R1. We wanted them to be reflective of each other. The other thing, though, that we wanted to make clear was that people might have complaints that they really don't feel like fit into one of those categories. And so the new policy we're proposing is almost a carbon copy of those two, but in more general terms, so that folks don't feel like that there isn't a place for them to file a complaint. The other thing is our parents, our students, they're not all attorneys, and so they might not know what some of these words mean, and so we didn't want to, again, box them into either what was under 102 or 104. And so our main take was really just to make them consistent, and so you'll see a lot of mirrored language, which is important. And we also tried to stay as close, and we'll walk through each one of them, but stay as close to the language that was already there, and I know it won't look like that in some of them, but for example, our policies already said the claims had to be filed within 180 days. That's reflective of if you take a claim via OCR, right, Eric? Yeah, OCR or the Iowa Civil Rights Committee, and so that is a common time frame that a complaint has to be filed in, and that was again already in our policy, so we didn't change that. It was already in our policy that that the office, or whoever the investigator is, has 15 days from the date they get the complaint to begin the work on that. So we didn't change that. We just made sure that that was consistent across every policy. And that the investigator also had 60 days to complete the investigation. Again, I don't think it's very clear, and so there's one other piece I'll add here at the end to help with that clarity too, but more for that consistency. And then one addition we made across all of them was really that communication back to the complainant, to make sure that we had it articulated that they were being updated along the way. What consistent communication means to one person means something different to someone else, but we just want to make sure that we put that out there on the front end so that people aren't expecting an update every week. Why we move with 20 days? It takes a long time to do some of this work, and also we have to have space to do this work. Eric had, and he's sitting right there, and he can comment on them, 63 different investigations that he had to do at one level or another last year, which that's more than one every 3 days of the school year. So trying to balance it so he has time to actually go out and do that work, and if he's supposed to respond to all the ongoing investigations every week, he's not gonna have the space to actually do that. So really, we didn't try to introduce anything new. We tried to provide some clarity and some consistency, and then also create a new catch-all policy so that everybody felt like they had somewhere to go, that they could file a concern or a complaint if they had one. So if we look at 102, this is our discrimination complaint process. So one of their things is, this was actually entitled the grievance procedure, and I've got too many tabs open. Look like Brady shut.
You can never have too many.
This actually falls out as the regulation under our equal education opportunity. So if you feel discriminated against, grievance might work in other districts, but we have a grievance policy in all of or a grievance procedure in all of our negotiated agreements. And so just the changing of that word to make sure that there wasn't that confusion for employees, we felt was important to do that. And so it doesn't really impact it, but also describe what it is. This is actually our discrimination complaint process. It falls out of that policy. So if you scroll down, just a lot of trying to change that wording. Just cleaning up something again as you look through what they have and what we don't have. And there it is, right? The second bullet on page 2. I caught it. I thought that's what a respondent needed to be in there, and it hadn't been in there. If you look at bullet 4, these are some things that we added. We pulled this language from the Board of Education Examiners Code of Rights and Responsibilities of Employees. And we want people to be transparent. We want people to help us get to the bottom of what situations are going on. And we felt, and we would recommend that the board join us in that feeling, that it's important for us to put out there that if you're asked to be involved in the investigation process, you do so honestly. We've always said that you have, and the association has been great about this, so they also tell their members that too, but we can't find a place that it's spelled out real clearly, so we thought it was important to clear it out, that you have an expectation as an employee to participate fully in investigations.
So one thing I noticed, Chase, is that, and thank you, I made the suggestion that these results, these are often very sensitive matters, and it would be nice if it was conveyed in person.
Mhm.
You added that, and I thank you. However, I don't want to make a lot of unnecessary work, so I know that. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe that language should be changed, that they will have the option for that, let them choose.
Okay.
Because
I'm
and it
open.
also could be an equity issue where people couldn't get here.
Sure.
So,
I'm open to that. I'm with you.
Okay.
I think if you file a complaint, you deserve to be
Right.
communicated with in person.
but
But if you think that is too restricting on us, we're definitely not going to pass up the opportunity for more flexibility.
yeah, I mean, if you leave it up to them,
Sure.
they have the option, and they can say yes or no to that.
Okay.
And so,
Yeah, maybe we can write it in the way that they have the option to receive
Provide the
the
opportunity.
provide the opportunity, because there's two sides to every one of these, right? And then I think that was the challenge we kind of articulated, is making sure that both of the complainant and the respondent receive the information somewhat timely, and either in scheduling those both can be a little cumbersome, or they may not want to wait to get that information right before they can come in to meet with us, so they may want it sooner, and then they may want the opportunity to meet afterwards too. So yeah,
transportation or-
right, yeah.
One of the other additions I would point out, under the decisions section in the next paragraph, and at the end of that paragraph, right above decision and appeal, was one of the things we heard from the board is, okay, what resources are provided to individuals that file a complaint, regardless if it's founded or not. And to be honest, that's not something that really should flow from Eric's office if he's doing the investigation, but it speaks to that communication back to the building or the department where that person is in, so they have that information and then have that understanding of there are next steps for you to take. If a student or an employee from your building files a complaint, and whether it's founded or unfounded, that's not the end of it, because that person's still living in your building. So we want to be very clear that depending on what the complaint is, there does need to be that communication back to the building, and then there is that expectation that resources, whatever those might be, every complaint's different, so it's hard to articulate exactly what every single one of them would be in this document, will be provided in that follow-up, so that we can go ahead and wrap around those students or those adults. Because just because it isn't found, it doesn't mean that person still isn't hurting or doesn't feel like they were aggrieved, and we want to make sure that we just don't tell them one thing and then ask them to go about their way. So we
think
thought it was
that's
important.
huge.
We thought that was important to articulate in here as well.
Great job on that.
Yeah.
Then the appeal, again, is just kind of going back to make sure that we have that lined out, and the vernacular the same. Some of these things are just the way different districts word people, and just making it fit our structure here and where we are. So questions on 102?
No question, but I do think it was important to change that one word grievance to complaint, because even a simple maybe Google search of our policy could confuse people under their negotiated contract. They may think that this is what they're completely bound by. So having the complaint process spelled out, I think is important with that one word change. Any other feedback?
No,
Okay.
I'm just, I agree. It's a lot of clarification, cleaning things up.
All right.
So 104, there is more, it looks like the first paper I ever got back in law school. There's so much red on it. But the reason for that is we used 102 as the base, and so we tried to match the wording from 102 and 104. That's why, especially if you look at the bottom of the first page and the second page, there's so much crossed out, because I don't know why. They say the exact same thing, they're just worded differently and ordered differently, and so we just wanted to reflect the same thing. So they obviously, there is more, so there's more of those changes, but again, trying to make sure that our processes are the same, regardless of what type of complaint that you are filing. So there shouldn't be any real surprises here. We can make that same change about providing the complainant the opportunity to choose whether or not to be in person. That's not a challenge for us. One thing I'll add, and you've kind of seen it in here, is that we use more the term investigator, because unlike discrimination, bullying can start at the building level. And one of the conversations we've had and that we're struggling with is it's really hard to articulate what complaints should start at the building level as opposed to what should start in Eric or Laura Gray's office. It's really hard without looking at individual circumstance to say that. So we're providing the board policies because this is what the board needs to approve and what's forward facing. But we are working on a guidance document behind the scenes. It is like a step-by-step for the administrator of, as you take this in and you hear it, your next call needs to be to Eric or to be to Laura. So we'll have that consistency as well that uses this as the backbone, but then really goes that next level so that the people here at the ESC stay in the loop, and then we're also doing that consistency. That's just more of an administrative document that reflects this and is coupled with this as we move forward.
So that will be shared with all building administrators?
Yeah, just a reminder for folks, like when we got elected, all of these things were all over the place. They weren't in one location, they weren't called the same thing. They were policies or guidelines or something. It was just really, really messy, and it wasn't easy to see for anybody. Certainly not the public, but a building administrator might be like, well, which one was that under a guideline or a... And so now, and frankly, it's the work of P&G, not me, the folks who did that, to the heavy lifting of getting this all at least in where we got 100, 200, 300, and we can review them. in an efficient way. And I'm kind of surprised there aren't more of these already. As we come across these inconsistencies in wordings, my guess is the reason it was like that is it was very patchwork as things were added in and they were put in places that were just.
When you're right, JP, it does hurt the application of it, right? Because then when people don't know it or can't find it, it's a lot harder to communicate what is supposed to happen in given circumstance, and so then we don't implement things as well, right? So it does matter on the policy level where those things sit and live. And
So then 107 is our new policy and regulation that we would ask the board to consider adopting, and that is that stopgap. So that if folks don't understand where to file a policy, they can always go to that. I'm sure you're very blatant, filing a complaint, right? We're not going to hide the name of it. That's what it is. And then it at least gets it on the record, because if you look at whether it's Title VII or anything around discrimination or harassment, the courts have been very clear that you don't have to say the magic words to actually file a complaint. And so we want to make sure that we are not trapping people or playing word or gotcha games, again, because they don't know what the words mean, so they don't think they can file something. So this should be an opportunity for them to file that, and then Eric, Laura, the building principal, if we feel like it needs to be cross-referenced under one of those other policies, we can also reference that as well. But just this general piece, it's same format, follows the same process, but again, make sure that everybody has some place that they can go to file a complaint to make sure their voice is heard if they have a concern.
And if they need help with that, they can call Janet.
And Janet.
All right. Answer that.
The only thing I have to add, and because it's her birthday today, is that do you want to add the executive director for Ray?
Oh, did we
Director
miss,
for
did I
Cultural
miss one?
Add executive.
Okay.
Happy birthday, Laura.
It's her birthday.
We'll
It
make
is
that
her
change.
birthday
I'm sorry.
today.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we'll make that
Hopefully she won't
change.
be with us tonight.
Right.
So then the last thing I would add, and I'm not getting out in front of the board, this is just for demonstration purposes, but it was easier to do it this way. If you navigate out to our website and you go to the HR page, we have added a drop-down box on the left side that says filing a complaint.
Oh, good.
And so you can click on that, and then it has all this different information, the different sections that are broken down there, so that people don't have to navigate to the board policies to do that.
Yes.
We can cross-reference that or add that link as many places as possible. We could do it under the equity department. We could even put a link at the bottom of the school board page, like there used to be for Appendix 6, that could take them here. So we have the opportunity to do that as many places as possible, but again, it's for that clarity and that transparency, so that people know exactly where to go and then they can follow that process.
I think that's important for transparency's sake, and I personally, and we can talk about this at the board table, think that it should be added to the board page as well, like when we had Appendix 6. And I do not mean to shut down discussion. We can definitely continue that investigative protocols on our next PMG meeting, but to allow time for the transition, I am just going to move on to agenda setting. That our next PMG meeting, I believe, is November 29th. That's Kim, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Look at
Yep.
it like, all right.
Yep, you're right.
5
Yep.
o'clock. And if there's no questions or concerns about that meeting
October
date and
29th.
time.
October, yeah. It's in October.
So 2 things on that
Oh,
one.
October, I'm
October,
sorry.
you just
I skipped over
misspoke,
that.
yeah. But the other one would be for our team, if there was any way, and you might want to talk about this in the regular meeting, if we could switch P&G and operations next month, but I know that would affect the operations members. That would help our team be here to have those conversations because we have some people out at different
So
times.
switch it for
Flip-flop.
October 11th for PNG.
Yeah, we'd like to do P&G ahead of the first meeting in October and then operations ahead of the
Okay, and
second.
we can have that conversation
Yeah,
at the board
up there,
table.
but.
So my apologies, not November, I just skipped all over October. So we'll talk about the next meeting date at the board table. But with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, motion is adjourned.
Thank you.
All right.